this lesson, we will review the multiple choice questions for an excerpt from The Amazing Author of Oz, and this would be an article. So be sure that you have read the article, and answered the multiple choice questions before beginning. And I will start with our first multiple choice question. Read the sentence from paragraph 1. Mr. Baum's stories were pure fantasy, so when he walked down the street in his finely tailored suit, children clamored in his wake. What effect does the author's word choices, what is the effect of the author's word choices in this sentence? All right, what is the effect? And as it indicates how much the children admired Baum and his stories. It hints that Baum was a serious person who told silly stories. It suggests children moved aside when Baum was near. It shows how rarely Baum told his stories to others. Now this one, we would need to know what the word clamored means. So if it says, Mr. Baum's, all the children in Ebony knew the tall, dapper gentleman who strolled through town each day. For each child on the Dakota Plains, life in the 1880s sometimes seemed little more than hard work. The bleakness of the prairie cried out for a fantasy to take a boy or girl far away. Mr. Baum's stories were pure fantasy. So when he walked down the street in his finely tailored suit, children clamored in his wake. Now, if you didn't know what clamored meant, after reading the story, you could probably assume it didn't mean they were like scared of him. And also, in his wake is a weird way to write something. This is an expression. If you've ever been wakeboarding, like on a lake, basically riding like the waves in a way. So in someone's wake would be a way to say like where after them, you're coming after they've arrived, or you're following them in their wake, or what somebody left behind. He left behind a disaster in his wake. That would mean after the person left, everything was all messed up. They trashed the house or something along those lines. So clamoring can't be a bad sense because the children are clamoring to him. And if I do look up the word clamoring, it can mean in a mean or like demanding way. But in this case, they're not protesting him. They're shouting loudly and insistently over and over again. They're probably asking, tell us a story. Because he also gives a setting there where in this time, it was the 1880s, the Dust Bowl area. And this would have been like if you were a farm kid, you were working on the farm. You might not have been going to school because it's saying all they knew was hard work. So seeing this guy as a storyteller, that would be really exciting for them. So we could say it indicates how much the children admired Baum and his stories. Also, the finely tailored suit thing could show he was worthy of admiration. Not that it could matter how fancy you are if you're worthy of admiration, but in this case, it's showing that he was someone to be admired. They were impressed by him, but most importantly, as children, they wanted to hear his stories. So that's why they were clamoring him or insistently bothering him. So for that one, it has to be A. Read this sentence from paragraph 2. Unlike stories told by parents, Baum's were not merely lectures in disguise. Based on this sentence, what is the author's point of view about Baum's stories? They are good at providing a strong moral. They are more entertaining than educational. They are different from children's stories of today. They are enjoyed more by children than by adults. So if we go back, we want the author's opinion. And the author, unlike stories told by parents, Baum's are not merely lectures in disguise. So a lecture might be like a story told about maybe a kid who was always late that ended up, ruining their whole life. A story that wasn't really fun. It was just a story about someone and their consequence, because a parent might not want the kid to be doing that. So for this one, it wouldn't be the one about they are good at providing a strong moral. Well, technically his stories did have morals, but they weren't morals, like fables, like that. They were fantasy stories. And he wrote so many, so they were based in like other worlds. The Wizard of Oz obviously is a different world. You could say the Wizard of Oz. Basically, the moral was there's no place like home. So that one wasn't technically, I guess, a lesson about running away. It was just her imaginary adventure. So I would say the author in this sense thinks that the stories were more entertaining than educational. They definitely weren't educational. So it has to be B. The author doesn't talk about the stories of today. And obviously they are enjoyed more by children than by adults. That kind of goes without saying. So for 9, it has to be B. And then we have, how does paragraph 3 develop a central idea? Central idea. All right, so that would be your lesson. And this is a really long paragraph, basically about all the stuff he wrote. And then after he died, his successors churned out 26 more. So a successor would be like whoever is in charge of your name or your business after you die or retire. So I don't know if it was his family or the publicist, but then it goes on, these days, the ambiguous MGM movie overshadows the book, but readers who choose to go there still find Oz so much more than lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Baum's Fairyland is a place for childish dreams and fears, a kingdom ruled by love, but haunted by fear of sudden death. It's a land where adults are as helpless as children, and children are as strong as adults. Peppered with puns and wordplay, Oz is charming and altogether ambivalent about the benefits of age. In short, it's much like its creator, L. Frank Baum, the royal historian of Oz. So this tells us basically what he wrote, it doesn't say how he died, but it says after he died, and what ends up happening to his stuff. Well, his name and his novels. So if I was going to say, what is the central idea? How does paragraph 3 develop the central idea? By listing characters that appeared in Baum's books. By describing the work for which Baum is best known. It did. By explaining the other authors continued Baum's work. That's technically not the central idea of the whole story, though, or article. By emphasizing that many books Baum wrote were forgotten. It's not exactly emphasize. Emphasize means you make a big deal about it. You draw a lot of attention to it. Like, this is a story about his long-lost work. This definitely wasn't a story about his long-lost work. It was certainly about the most famous one. Talks several times about Oz, and then all the other books that came along with Oz. It does say many are long forgotten, but that's a very quick statement there. It is not all about that. Sometimes they try to catch you by using a direct quote from the paragraph and asking if that's the answer or the central idea. So this article was not about his long forgotten books. It was about basically like a lot of his entire life. So if we go back to this one, we would say, describing the work for which Baum is best known. You could also say that would be pretty much the reason someone would read a biography about him, because they would want to know. That's how they know him, the Wizard of Oz, right? So by describing the work for which Baum is best known, that would be our answer for number 10. Why is this guy famous? Because the Wizard of Oz was a huge success. Even in the beginning, in the first couple paragraphs, they're talking about that as well. In paragraph 4, what inference can be drawn from the information about Baum's early childhood? An inference is just an assumption that you can make from the text. So we're talking about his early childhood, paragraph 4. And we have, he was the 7th child, born to Benjamin Cynthia, came not trailing clouds of glory, but clouds of doom. In 1856, Frank was born. From an early age, he seemed to have suffered from angina pectoris, a heart disease causing severe chest pain. His delicate condition made him solitary child. He read constantly, mostly fairy tales. For most of his youth, he was schooled at home. While Frank was still very young, his father developed some oil fields in Pennsylvania and made a fortune. The Baums moved to a mansion called Roselawn, where Frank flourished. This is really random that you could just discover oil in your yard and be like, here's my oil, and then you're rich. Because if you own the property and it's your oil, which Pennsylvania, that's weird. Usually it's Texas. But anyways, that's where a lot of oil is. So, sedentary. We would have to know what this word sedentary means. Solitary would mean by yourself. Sedentary and delicate condition. So he had a heart problem. Pectoris would be your muscles here. And then angina has to do with like your heart. So Baum's health problems affected how he felt about his family. Didn't say anything about how he felt about his family. Baum's older siblings influenced his approach towards education. Possibly because he was homeschooled, but it doesn't exactly say that. So we could leave. We could think. Baum's home education affected how he felt about other children. Doesn't say anything about him and other children, but it could have. Baum's constant reading of fairy tales influenced his later writing. Now, for this, he was mostly reading. So sedentary means you're not very active. If you had a sedentary job, it would mean you worked at a desk all day. So sedentary means not doing a lot of motion, sitting predominantly. So him reading all these books, we might be able to say here that is a good inference to make, that growing up, he was influenced by his fairy tale reading, because it didn't say about how he felt about his family. It didn't really say anything about, well, the other thing, if we're making an inference, it's a pretty good guess because he became a famous fantasy writer. So the story didn't say anything about his siblings. So therefore, that B wouldn't be a good answer. And his home education, it might have affected how he ended up being a writer, but it didn't say anything about him interacting with other children. So, because the article doesn't say much about B or C, we would have to say D. This is a story about how he was a fantasy, or an article about him becoming a fantasy writer. So, it has to be D. Number 11 is D. Read this sentence from paragraph 6. No road to success was ever more winding than Baum's. How does this sentence contribute to the structure of the article? Structure can be a tricky one. Structure just means how the article is set up. How did this author build our article? Paragraphs 1 through 5. Everything seemed to be about, well, he did have a health problem, which is like, that's a setback, right? But his dad striking oil and then becoming a millionaire, that's a good thing, you could say, especially because they were flourishing there, right? Then 18, he wants to become an actor. It's not so good that his dad told him no. His dad said to steer stage-struck son from his dream. Stage-struck means you fall in love with it, like love-struck, but instead stage-struck. So, for this, asking only that Frank not disgrace a family name, his dad does end up letting him go. But when it says this, no road to success was ever more winding, the article then goes on to talk about how bad things went. So winding means that you have a bunch of setbacks. A straight road to success means everything went swell and you got right there as fast as possible. Winding means it took time, there was mishaps, there was accidents. So here we see he was so successful that he could even consider marriage. All right, he's getting successful there. According to the family legend, he ends up getting married. Thank you, Mr. Baum. That's a promise. Please see the upload to it. He did. Married the next year, Frank and Maud remained as devoted as any fairy tale couple, but Maud soon found that her husband often resided in his own world entirely. Not good. Then we have the setbacks. And the time of the marriage, 1882, Baum suffered a series of setbacks, business and health. And his dad lost the money. So that is nothing good either. And now, Aberdeen, South Dakota, Baum decided the town needed an upscale start. store to started Baum's Bazaar. The bazaar broke even for a while. But when the Dakota boom ended, the store went belly up. So there we have a setback. And then here we have another setback. Baum fell back on old friends, his fantasies. Well, actually, this is when things start going better because everything went badly, and then broken far from home, fell back on old friends, his fantasies, his stories he told on Aberdeen's dusty sidewalks spoke of a better land where goodness prevailed. Yet Baum was still required to make a living, so he moved the family to Chicago. For a time, he edited his own magazine promoting store windows, but more important to children, he finally began to write down his stories. So here, he starts to be a writer. But this is kind of weird because the beginning tells us he was successful, and then the second half talks more about his struggles. Because here he has his next book, Father Goose. His book became the nation's best-selling children's title. After decades of dead ends, Baum had finally found his road. So here is going to circle back to the beginning where he ends up writing the Wizard of Oz story. So when we go back to this, how did this sentence contribute to the structure? It summarizes the first 5 paragraphs. It can't summarize the first 5 paragraphs because that's all about his success. So it can't be A. It contrasts the first half of the article with the second half of the article. It serves as a topic sentence for the remainder of the article. It gives a cause for the events in the remainder of the article. The sentence, does it give a cause? It doesn't give a cause. A cause would be like if it says he broke his leg, and then in this one he breaks his leg, and then it goes on about that. So this is just a saying, not technically a cause. A topic sentence, it does kind of give us the sentence of all the things that are going to go wrong. So topic sentence could work there. If we say it contrasts the first half of the article with the second half of the article, that one is good too. This answer is actually really hard to come up with because both B and C are very likely. But see, A, it can't be A. Because in the first 5 paragraphs, things were going really well. I mean, in the first paragraph, children were clamoring over him, right? So it contrasts the first half. You could say, now, in the first half, not everything was like good. I mean, it shows how he ends up the success. But paragraph 4, he has this issue with his health, which is not good, right? And you have paragraph 5, he gets in this kind of beef with his dad, right? His dad kind of disowns him in a way. Yeah, asking only Frank not disgrace the family name. So basically he told him he had to use a different name because he says going by various stage names. So I would say this no road to success was ever more winding kind of includes paragraph 5. It wasn't exactly a contrast. Paragraph 4 and 5, things started to get bad. So it can't be B. Because the first half, bad stuff happened too. So for this, it's the topic sentence for the remainder of the article. What is his life story trying to become this famous writer, which he did. So for that one, it's C. And that one was hard. Which sentence states a central idea? Baum was devoted to his wife and family. Baum wrote a play and acted in the starring role. Baum lived for several years in a small prairie town. Baum had to overcome many difficulties throughout his life. Now this one, you would want the lesson or the meaning behind it. Yes, he was a devoted... Well, actually, he wasn't, because it said the thing how he was all in his fantasy world and his wife started to get mad. He did write a play, and he did star in the role, but that definitely was not talked about through this whole article, right? He did live several years in Prairie Town, but that didn't have to do with the article as a whole either. So D is really the one that's a lesson, and also D is one where it's a claim that you can prove. So you could prove with many examples throughout this entire article that he had difficulties and he overcome them. How did he overcome them? He wrote all these famous books, and now he died as a famous author as a Wizard of Oz and all the other ones, right? And the difficulties, many difficulties. So that would be your answer. D. That's a central idea. They can be proven from the text. And it basically was what the whole entire text was about. What benefit did Baum's stories offer to listeners, readers, and to Baum himself? They offered an entertaining distraction from the harsh realities of life. They offered a chance to invent new and exciting characters and places. They offered an exciting way to learn about the world around them. They offered a new perspective on how adults and children should behave. That's what I'm pretty sure we can guess. We'll go from the bottom to the top. They offered a new perspective on how adults and children should behave. Definitely no. This, like they said before, these weren't behavior books, they were fantasy entertainment books. They offered an exciting way to learn about the world around them. He was not a writer of textbooks. If he was like Bill Nye the Science Guy or a learning show, yeah, but he didn't write about the real world. He wrote a fantasy world. Offered a chance to invent new and exciting characters. They did for him. So B only gave the benefit to Baum. The readers weren't inventing new characters. They were reading the characters he invented. So B does not apply to all three, readers, listeners, and Baum. It has to be A. They offered an entertaining distraction from the harsh realities of life. He talks about that several times through the story. Even Baum's life, he liked his stories because he had been going through this when he was a child, and then when he went through his depression stage, he started writing. And then the children were clamoring to him in the beginning because the realities of life on these farms in the 1880s was not one people wanted to be. And so, offered an entertaining distraction from the harsh realities of life. And you could actually really say that is even today, like that's the purpose of television, movies, music, books, all these things. And I would almost say A is a better central idea. I would almost combine answer choice A with answer choice D for a central idea and say something like, Baum overcame many difficulties throughout his life, which is why his stories which he brought to his stories, which is why we could say Baum overcome many difficulties throughout his life, which enabled him, or which influenced his fantasy writing that brought an entertaining distraction to millions of readers and viewers throughout history. Well, even since his death, something like that. Or since his death, Baum's stories have been an entertaining distraction from the harsh realities of life, just like they were for him as a child. Something along those lines. I would add a little more to the central idea if I was writing an essay for the story, but we're not. So these would be the answers for our multiple choice questions in our Wizard of Oz biography by amazing author of Oz.